Cullen and his wife and kids, they rented a cabin. Cullen, who had recently purchased this pontoon boat, he wanted to just fish for another 30-45 minutes before ending the weekend. He wanted to be picked up at the next boat ramp down the way. He would call when he needed a ride. Jennifer receives a phone call from her husband, but when she answers the phone, Cullen is frantic, and he's telling her that he's being followed by two men in the tree line. And before Jennifer can even get a word out, Cullen says to her that he's going to beach the boat and take his clothes off. And then he hangs up. But what stood out to her was how scared he sounded on the phone. She knew he was in serious trouble. So she calls 911 and she describes where he is in the Baldwin River. After Jennifer got off the phone with police, she called her family. And so her brother tried calling Cullen, and Cullen answered. And Cullen would say, "I don't know where I am, but there's these two guys that are still following me." And all Cullen said is, "You know, it's getting pretty rough out here." And then he hung up. Jen and her family decide the best thing they can do is go to the boat ramp where Cullen had said he wanted to be picked up, in hopes that maybe he would make his way there. Cullen's not there. They get out, they're yelling for him. There's no sign of him, and shortly after, a police car would show up. They take an official statement from Jennifer, and at this point, they file an official missing person report. Before the police began looking for Cullen, they reached out to his wireless service provider, and they asked them to ping his cell phone from the tower. The last 4 locations that the service provider pinged for Cullen were up to 4 miles apart from each other. The idea that in a very rugged, rough area, in a very short amount of time, that Cullen had been moving 4, 5, 6, 7 miles just to get to these different points, that didn't really make sense. But also when they looked at these points on a map, it looked like each of them was either near a paved road, or in order to get to them, you would have had to cross a paved road. Why does he keep moving point to point if at any one of these locations he's near relative safety? But as strange as these 4 locations were, the police now had a really solid starting point. So they dispatched people to each of these points, and they began combing along the river where he had last been seen. And within an hour, they discovered his boat. It was a little ways down from where he had been dropped off. It was missing an oar, and it was basically beached on the side of the river. They couldn't find any sign that Cullen was in the area. They were yelling for him. He wasn't yelling back. Interestingly, a man who owned property near where the pontoon boat was found reported to police hearing screaming or yelling coming from the area around the same time that Cullen went missing. For the next 48 hours, police and hundreds of people searched in the areas where his cell phone had pinged and along the river where his pontoon had been found, but there was no sign of him. Approximately 48 hours after Cullen had gone missing, they discovered his body. It was located less than a half mile away from a paved road, and it was situated in between those 4 points that the cell phone provider had given. He was laying completely face down with his right arm under his body and his left arm over his head, clutching some grass. When they rolled him over, he had some blood coming out of his nose, but besides that, there was no significant trauma anywhere on his body. Cullen appeared to be wearing all of his clothes. However, it was noted that the strap on his waders was really badly twisted. Now, if he had never taken his clothes off, that would have been something he would have fixed. He said to his wife on the phone that he was going to be taking his clothes off, which there was no explanation for that, but he clearly said that to his wife, and she reported that to police. And so some have speculated that between that phone call and finding him with the twisted strap on his waders, that indicates that perhaps his clothes did come off at some point over the past couple of days and were put back on again, either by him or by someone else. His cell phone had also been found in his front pocket, indicating that those cell phone pings had been his actual location. Initially, Cullen's autopsy was completely inconclusive. There was no trauma to his body. There was no obvious thing that killed him. But later on, it was determined he died of pneumonia. Many people believe Cullen's death was the result of a traumatic brain injury caused by all the years of playing football and getting hit in the head. And so that can lead to paranoia. And so perhaps this was a fit of paranoia. He got turned around, he got scared, he thought somebody was chasing him. And in 2011, Cullen had briefly shown signs of being a little bit paranoid when one day he thought someone was following him, and he actually went to a family member's house, but he could never identify where this person was or who they were. But even if this was a fit of paranoia and no one was following him in the woods, well, why didn't he stop on the paved road every time he crossed it? Because that would have represented safety. When he supposedly had another fit of paranoia, his instincts were to go to a family member and to seek help. And so you would think his instincts in this situation would be similar, but he continuously left safety. He left the road. He left his boat. His boat was safety. Why did he leave his boat? And even if we turn this around and we say, no, it was not a fit of paranoia, that he was in fact being followed by someone or something in the woods, well then why would that prompt him to call his wife and say, I'm going to get out of the boat and take my clothes off, and then proceed to walk 4, 5, 6, 7 miles in a very short period of time, crossing over a paved road at least 1 or 2 times and not stopping, not signaling for help? That doesn't make sense either. And what was that screaming that resident heard coming from the area where the pontoon boat was found? Unfortunately, there are many questions in this case, and the vast majority of them will go unanswered. Just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.